Bonjour tout le monde. Comment ça va? So good to be with you this morning. It's our immense joy to be with our family, our spiritual family, our friends. And we've been looking forward to this a long time. It's been a long time since we've actually been able to preach and teach on a pulpit. God has been doing some wonderful things in our own lives, but one of them isn't being on a platform, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But these past 2 pandemic years have been really hard on all of us. Really, right? I mean, we've had to lose some things, but at the same time, there are blessings in it. And for us, we've got blessed with 2 new grandchildren. We turned 60 this year. See that white beard? Isn't that nice? And we have now been on the mission field all over the world, Asia, here and there, Europe, for 30 years. Wow. You know, and we'd love to write a book, and although if we could write a book, it would be a lot about things that we have failed at, things that we have misunderstood, things that we've learned. And I would want to maybe even call it the story of us. Because it's not just about Peter and Pat. It's really about all of us, about the church. It's about you. It's about people that God brings along the way that intersect with our lives, both agitators and encouragers. And boy, God did do some wonderful things through a lot of people to bring us to this point today. The story of us. Well, I want to begin this morning with a trailer of an amazing clip. It's from Ai Weiwei, who is a Chinese dissident. His father was sent to exile when he was just a little boy, and they lived in the harshest of conditions. And when he grew up, he spoke out against the government, and he became this activist, and he got put in jail. But when he got out, he left immediately for Berlin. But he's an artist, a photographer, a videographer, and he has done this documentary called The Human Flow. And I want you to just to notice some of the pictures, but more than that, listen for some of the phrases. See if there's something that resonates with you today.
Being a refugee is much more than a political status. It is the most pervasive kind of cruelty that can be exercised against a human being. You are forcibly robbing this human being of all aspects that would make human life not just tolerable, but meaningful in many ways.
The more immune you are to people's suffering, that's very, very dangerous. It's critical for us to maintain this humanity.
الان 60 روزه با پسرم همینطوری داریم میچرخیم، ولی هیچ کس نیستش که بگه یه راهی رو بخواد به ما نشون بده. کجا برم زندگیمو شروع کنم؟
If children grow up without any hope, without any prospects for the future, without any sense of them being able to make something out of their lives, then they will become very vulnerable to all sorts of exploitation, including radicalization.
ليش انتوا هنا اليوم؟
طشة احنا الفصل المنفذ الوحيد في غزة، في السجن الكبير غزة، مش في غزة، سجن كبير يعني.
The officials came here and told them, look, there's no way you're going to get papers to continue. Either you go voluntarily or we arrest you.
I respect you. I respect the passport and I respect you.
It's going to be a big challenge to recognize that the world is shrinking and people from different religions, different cultures are going to have to learn to live with each other.
wanted to begin with that particular trailer with you to help frame, help convey the massive displacement of people that is happening in our world, beginning really in 2013, 14, and becoming so huge in 2015, but it's still happening today. And I watched this documentary and I kept on looking for the faces. I thought, I'm going to recognize some of my friends. We have so many refugee friends who have told us their stories, and I think of Abbas, who was kidnapped and extorted for money when he was in Libya. He came from Chad. And I think of my friend Alassane, who said when he got on the boat, he was holding his hands with his friends from Gambia when the boat went down, and he never saw his friends again. I think of Khaled, whose hero, his father, was imprisoned by Bashar al-Assad, and 5 years he didn't see his father. I think of all of my friends who have gone through so much horrific stuff. I think of Shahram, who was demonstrating in Tehran, and while they were demonstrating against the government, the Revolutionary Guard started shooting, and he got hit in his hand, and he's been operated in his hand 13 times, and he can still barely move his fingers. These are my friends. And this is the surprising thing, that the Lord has thrown us into this human flow of need. We never expected it, but the Lord brought us from Thailand 22 years, and through a brain tumor brought us to Europe, and we find ourselves with human need.
We never expected it to be doing this work in France. However, when you live in a certain way, when you have eyes to see certain things, it was inevitable that in time we would find ourselves among friends who were refugees. We deliberately decided to live in the middle of Paris, a city of millions of people, so that we would live large, because it's okay to live large in a great big city. We decided we would walk with our arms wide open, and that way you bump into way more people. And we decided we would say yes to things that came our way. And yes can be a very scary, messy, unpredictable place. So were we surprised? Yes and no. Because back in Thailand, we had many friends who were refugees, who opened their hearts, their lives, to allow us to actually join in their stories. And like that song that you sang with all your hearts this morning, this was meant for evil, the things that happen to us, and we categorize them and we put them in the drawer of bad things. One day, through the work of God, we open that drawer again, we take that thing out that we call evil, and we put it into the new drawer, the drawer of good things that God had planned for us. Sometimes we don't get to see the changing of the drawer. We don't get to see the recategorizing of an event in someone's life. But when we've been doing this for 30 years, we get to see a lot of that. And so when we were in Thailand, we met a beautiful couple, a beautiful family who had come from Pakistan, Sajjad and Farzana. And he was a pharmacist assistant. But once they arrive in Thailand, and for whatever reason, when people have to flee their own country, it's because something about them, something about their belief, something about who they are has categorized them as an outsider. And so these people who now find themselves as outsiders in danger in their own country flee to another country where they are nothing but an outsider again. An outsider who doesn't know the language, who doesn't know their way around, who have no rights. That's where we met Sajjad and Farzana in Bangkok. People who are 100% dependent on someone else, seeing how they are in need and responding at the same time, preserving human dignity. That's a lot of hard work. And we worked with Sajjad and Farzana to try to get them sponsors to Canada. And it looked like it was impossible. It really looked difficult. By the time we left Thailand, they still had no sponsors. And they stayed back in Bangkok when we came to Europe. We kept in touch. But it wasn't long, and we had a connection in Toronto, and we asked, and we kept asking people, and it was no, and it was no, and it was no. But one day it was, wait a minute, maybe we can help. And sure enough, we found people who could sponsor Sajjad and Farzana and their daughter Angel to move to Toronto. And just this last week, those years and years of struggle and being unseen as refugees in Bangkok, we were able to open the drawer of bad things, recategorize that aspect of their story, and see what had been meant for evil and destruction has now become something good. We visited them. They invited us to come to their home in Toronto to have dinner last Sunday on Halloween. And we went into their apartment where he is the assistant superintendent of this beautiful apartment building not far from Rosedale. Beautiful neighborhood with single-dwelling family homes and trees that are older than anybody who lives on that street. And we had a meal with them. And there was so much excitement that Uncle Peter and Aunt Patricia were there on Halloween, and we were going to go trick-or-treating with them, and we were going to have dinner, and these children are jumping on us and climbing on us, and it's a good thing Uncle Peter is already grandpa, and he knows the grandpa energy. So we had this meal with them, and we all got bundled up nice and warm to go out for trick-or-treating. But before that, during the meal, Peter asked Farzana, he said, Farzana, what is the one thing in coming to Canada that you love? And without hesitation, without a split second, not even to inhale, she said, freedom. Freedom. And that's because of people like you. You create the freedom in this country. It's not a government, it's not politics, it's people like you who make choices to allow freedom to happen within your communities, within your homes, around your tables. And we got to see the beauty of the work of God in this beautiful, beautiful family.
And I never knew Halloween such a big thing in Canada until this past Sunday. And little Angel was going like, this is the best day of my life. We have Uncle Peter and Auntie Pat with us, and we get to go trick-or-treating. And what an awesome thing to see these people who lived 7 years under stress, not knowing whether they would get asylum at all in Canada. And we begin with that story because you got to begin with the end in mind. You got to begin with hope. And hope is like that bird who begins to sing. Even though the dawn has not started yet, it knows that the light is inside its heart and there's hope, and it begins to sing. And that's what every refugee needs to have, hope. Right now in our world, there are probably 79.5 million people who have been forcibly displaced. That's twice the size of our country in Canada. They say that 1% of our whole world right now are living as displaced people. They've been forced into this monotony, this trauma, this wondering what's going to happen with my life. And as you listen to some of the phrases from that documentary, I come back with being a refugee is more than a political status. It is the most pervasive cruelty that can be exercised against a human being. It's been called a refugee crisis in Europe. But for me, it shouldn't be a refugee crisis. It really is a political crisis started by the politicians. It's a receptivity crisis. It's a compassion crisis. We, the human being, we have so many resources. We are so intelligent. We can harness this earth and provide so much for ourselves, but we've written this old story, and we keep on doing the same old story. It's a story of rejection. It's a story of competition. It's a story of violence. It's a story of war. But God wants us, the story of us, to be a new narrative where there's hope, where there's joy, where there's freedom, where there's equality, where we live as brothers and sisters, no matter what color our skin is. And this began to really, when we moved to France, we had no idea what, why, when, or how. We didn't know what we were doing. All we knew is that the Lord was pushing us, shoving us to go to Europe. It was a scary thing for us after 22 years. And we got there and we didn't know what we were doing, but we knew one thing. We didn't want to spend all our time in church. Sorry about that, Pastor Rick. We just, like my 22 years in Thailand, I'm telling you, I was there for the church. I preached at camps. I was on 9 different committees. I was always in the church, and I gave everything for the church. We trained, we baptized, we preached, and I got to France, and I said, I don't want to go to church again like that. I want to be on the street, but you know, it takes time. And I got in that default mode, and I had to find a church, and there was a church plant, and we started preaching, and they wanted us to do this and that, and I said, no, I have to go on the street, but they couldn't understand us, that we needed to be on the street. We wanted to have parties in the wine cellars and dance, and we wanted to reach the people on the streets, and they said, no, we do things in the church. We have deliverance services, we have prayer meetings, we have preaching times, and I said, maybe we should just do a nice departure. I bless you, you bless me, and the Lord, after a couple years in France, put us on the street. And we started with just giving out sandwiches. We're a small team, about 4 people, 5 people, giving out food. But one day I happenstanced on a camp of refugees, and I knew my calling. That's where God wanted me. And I wanted to be a voice for refugees. I wanted to tell their stories. I wanted to do something for God among this people group that don't have a voice. And we started inviting people even into our home, and it kind of went like this. We started with welcome dinners. And I remember the first time we got a list of people from the Jesuits, and they said, we're going to send you Najibullah, Abdullah, Abdel, Gerald, and we were looking at these names and saying, whoa, how am I going to remember these names, and do they speak English? And so they came to our apartment, and we had made a nice meal, and we were like, what do you like to do, you guys? And one said, I want to be a gardener, and the other one said, I want to be a fitness instructor, Abdullah, and Najibullah said, I love to do archery, and Gerald said, I'm a dance hall. And I said, what? Dance hall, I love dance hall. And I said, I don't know what that is. And one of the guys said, show us. And before you knew it, he was like dancing in our living room. And then he got all of us doing this dance hall in our living room. And there we were, 6 men and 2 women dancing like this in the living room. And I don't even know how to dance. I look like Big Bird having a heart attack when I dance. It's like... But it was the beginning, how I began to understand this people group who needed just to be loved, to have a sense of belonging. And then we started getting into the Iranian community with Shahram, who has been in Europe for 13 years. He left at 17. The guy I told you about who was shot in his hand, and he said one day to me, I want to be baptized. And I said, you don't have to do it in church. Shh, I didn't say that, did I? And so I rented a cafe, and we invited our friends who were church people. And listen, I love church, okay? I still go to church. I'm actually the missions director in my church, just so that you know. But we got a pool, and we filled it with water in this cafe, and we baptized Sharam with all his friends there. And I remember 2 of his friends who are atheists, we asked everybody to pour water on his hands before he was baptized and bless him. And they came up and they blessed him by pouring water on his hands. And it was a beautiful time. And since then, we've seen 4 other Iranians get baptized, and another one is getting ready to be baptized. And I say, God, I didn't expect this. But the Lord had kept on preparing us, from people from Pakistan, from Vietnam while we were in Thailand, from Sri Lanka, from China, inviting them off the streets into our church, even prostitutes, even drug dealers who are tattooed from top to bottom. And the Lord was preparing us. So when we got to France, we said, this is the people group we need to minister to. And they have taught us so much. So we've done welcome dinners. I think we got a picture of some of these things. Yeah, we do events. This was a Christmas event where we had about 50 refugees and 30 of our volunteers. And then not only do we love to do events, we've started some language exchanges where we get about 20 guys with 20 volunteers. And yeah, you can show the picture as well. Just follow me. And we do it in the park because we have no building. You can't afford anything in Paris. It's so expensive. So we do it on the street. We walk. During COVID, we went one by one and we walked and we talked. And I remember one day I did a little debrief, and Imran from Pakistan, he got up and he said, I love doing this because this is the only place where I feel like this is my family. You are my family. And this is why we do what we do. And after that, we did some really cool things that we started inviting our friends to our food distributions. And this little group of 4 or 5 people, now sometimes on a Saturday, is 60 people, volunteers from every walk of life. Most of them are not believers. A lot of them are Muslims. We invite our refugee friends. That's Sharam in the front taking a selfie. And there is Christian from Sri Lanka. And there is a fellow from Afghanistan on the bottom. And our friend from Brazil, from Australia, from France, and New Zealand. I mean, we're an expat community. We're loving people. And I've never had so many opportunities in my life to share the story of my walk with Jesus Christ. This is just the way the Lord has been doing it in our lives. Last winter, you can show the next slide, we couldn't house people in our church anymore. We were doing it in our gym for about 100 nights during the cold winter nights. But in our church, because our church is a very historic church, but it's not a rich church, and so they have to rent out their facilities. And so we checked in the guys at 9:30 at night, and we had to check out the guys at 7. And it really made you understand what they go through all the time, walking the streets, not knowing where they're going to sleep, not knowing what they're going to do all day. And so this past year, we actually rented a hostel and got 14 guys, and we fed them every night. So our volunteers would come, and we would talk with them and share stories. And this was the best thing we could ever do with our volunteers, so that people begin to have a heart for this beautiful people group. And then we do special initiatives. My wife is known right now for having the best chicken soup in the world. All our refugee friends say, wow, this is the best. And, you know, this next picture, I got involved in this squat, this abandoned building with 250 refugees, asylum seekers, migrants. They just took over the building. And we got involved by giving some food, by helping them with showers and fixing up some of their toilets. And it's really horrible conditions. But a group called Artolution heard about us and said, can we go paint a mural on your wall? And I said, yeah, we'd love that. And so we got the guys to actually design the design. So the refugees said, we want a boat like our prophet Noah. They're all Muslim. And we want a tree of life coming out of the middle of the boat. We want animals that are from Africa. And on the right-hand side, we want our hut. And on the left-hand side of the boat, we want the Eiffel Tower. We want it to represent our journey to Europe. And while I'm doing this with the refugees, I'm just thinking, thank you, Lord. This is my family. We don't get to choose our family, do we? But we belong to each other. Patricia, you remember the one time you went to Place des Vosges? Would you tell that story?
Yeah. I don't always go out with Peter when he does the distribution. Sometimes I do. I think there needs to be a special course that I have to take to learn not to cry when I do this. Because when I'm meeting the people and seeing the needs and seeing the struggle, I just feel it so deeply, because something about carrying the DNA of God causes us to see that very same DNA in the people we're serving. And you see the people you're serving not just as the homeless or the refugees, but this could be my son, this could be my sister, this could be me. And so that connectedness is very compelling in how I respond and interact with the people that we meet on the streets. So one day, I had a very deeply moving experience to meet some young teenagers who had just arrived in Paris the night before. I've never had that. Young men who've come from countries in Africa, and they had no idea what to do. Pure outsiders, knowing nothing, and they are minors on top of it. At that same time in Paris, there was a huge demonstration being staged by some activist groups who want to highlight the plight of the refugees and the desperate housing that is provided, that is not provided, that should be provided. So to make a statement, they organized this demonstration in the most posh area of Paris, Place des Vosges. And in the beautiful park, in the square, they set up the tents and they brought in hundreds of refugees, but not just young men, that we are usually working with the young men, moms and babies and children, all in these tents overnight in the heat of the summer. And so I was heading over with one team of volunteers to bring food into this camp. And so Peter said, take these young men with you, because the activists who are organizing this manifestation, this protest, they will know how to help these boys. And I said, okay, so follow me. And in the following, and we got talking, and I learned where they came from. And you don't ask too many questions at first, because it takes months, even years, to have trust. And so just knowing how to ask questions, they don't know when they're born because they come from villages where survival is not about knowing when you're born or celebrating your birthday. Survival is knowing when you're going to get food and how you're going to avoid soldiers. So I took them into this park, and it's surrounded with police vans, and it's surrounded with the barricades of armed police. If you've ever seen any media reports of police in Paris, they're very intimidating. And the police were surrounding all the doors, and they said, if you're bringing food, you have to go to the North Gate. So we all went around the North Gate, and I was not sure, are the police going to arrest these boys? Do I have to protect them? What am I going to do? I had no idea. It was the first time I'd ever done anything like this. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the system. I have no idea how to help refugees when it comes to facing police barricades. We went to the North Gate, and they said, oh, if you want to bring food, you've got to go to the South Gate. So we went back to the South Gate, because you don't argue and you don't show attitude. So we went back with my team of volunteers and these two young boys, and my heart is breaking, and I'm thinking about their mothers, and I'm seeing the mothers on the inside, and I had to just say, I'll be right back in 1 minute. I went behind the pillars, these ancient pillars in Place des Vosges, and I had to cry and wipe my face, because I'm not ashamed of my tears, but I really didn't want the weight of my tears to add to the weight of their desperate situation. And those people inside this barricade and in these tents, I just thought, I'm not gonna transfer the weight of my discomfort onto these people who are in true discomfort. And before I left them with the people who could actually help them, I said, is it all right if I give you a hug? I know your mothers are worried, and from your mother, wherever she is right now, I'm going to hug you, and I hope everything goes well. And if we stay in this long enough, maybe someday down the road, I will get to meet these young boys, and they'll say, yeah, I remember you hugged me in the park. And I hope I get that day. Maybe I won't, but that's a part of what we do as well. But the hope is that I will someday see them.
Oh, man, our time is already up. The things that we mentioned to you today are really seemingly small. Opening up our apartment, feeding some sandwiches, some soup, touching, painting. But you know, there's something about small things, they add up. Many people doing small things can have a huge impact. And so we've seen this small group of volunteers grow to 300 right now on our Telegram group. We've seen lives changed. I remember even one day I was walking with my coffee in my sandwich bag, and I hear this voice behind me, and he said, "I would like a coffee too," in English. And I turned around and he said, "Do you recognize me?" And I didn't recognize me. He had the most beautiful smile, good-looking young man from Africa. And he said, "I'm Jeremiah from Tanzania." And I looked at him and I could not believe this is not the same guy. He said, "Yeah, I used to be the guy underneath the bridge at Austerlitz. You used to come all the time giving us coffee, and you spent time talking to us. Oh, I'll never forget." And as I'm giving him coffee, he says, "Now I got my papers. Now I bought myself a bike, and I deliver food for Uber Eats." And I said, and then he said, "Yeah, and I got a goal to make 100 euros every single day." I said, "How are you doing?" "Well," he said, "not too bad." And then I said, "Wow, what is your secret?" And he said, "A vision and consistency. Just like you guys, you came all the time to where we were, consistently offer what you thought was small, but it just made such a big difference for us." And he said, "Thank you." I think of Mother Teresa, who said this, "I might not be able to change the world alone, but I can take this rock and throw it along the waters and see the ripples, many ripples and ripples." It reminded me of this guy who wrote to me almost every day on Facebook and said, "I need help, I need help. I'm from Korea, and I live outside of Paris, and we had a meeting, and I begged him to come see me, and he came to see me. It took him a long time to see me. And he told me, "I have not eaten in 3 days." And I said, "Follow me." I went to the noodle shop, and you couldn't believe when a Korean hasn't eaten for 3 days and eats noodles. Oh my God, he thought I was Jesus, I'm telling you. And then I invited him to my home and gave him new shoes because his shoes were too small, and gave him a new pair of pants, and he's looking at me and he can't believe it. And today, he writes me every day. He calls me my dear, my mentor, my dear. And he's a Catholic, and he said, "I pray that Jesus will help you today." And I said, "I'm going to tell you your story." And he said, "I'm so ashamed." I said, "Don't you be ashamed. You're part of our family." And it's just through these consistent interactions with this people group, we see change. It really is a story of us, the human flow. Some of you came from other countries, like me, born in Holland, from a mom who was orphaned by World War II. You know what this feeling is, to start all over again. Patricia and I have started all over many times in Thailand and Germany and back to France, and we know the adjustments, and we know the need for human touch. But it's Jesus in us that is touching people's lives, and we do it together. We could never do it without you. Thank you so much for your prayers, for your giving, for your friendship and love. We honor you today. In Jesus' name, amen.